Thank you for the introduction. Hi everyone. Well, it usually goes lengthy about the sponsors, but I'm so proud to see how many companies are supporting Ladies at UX nowadays. It's amazing. I think it just proves how important is the community and what a big change you guys made. So proud to that. How is everyone doing today?
Very good.
How was the food in the quarters? Wasn't that beautiful? I was like, when I walked in, I was like, oh my god, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So yeah, hopefully everyone is feeling fed, and hopefully you're not cold. It's getting a bit warmer in the room. So a few of the organizational questions in the beginning. I know that the toilets are here, just to make sure that if you're wanting to run away, it's there, just behind the wall. All right, and thanks for coming today on Saturday. As Agatha said, I think it's amazing to have so many people today joining us, because we have a very important topic to talk about today. We collected today a diverse group of leaders, a diverse group of designers, product designers, mentors, mentees, and people who are simply interested in the topic of the empathy, because this is what we're going to be talking about today, empathy in leadership. But first, before we're going to go into the actual discussions, I would like to start introducing our panelists today, because we have 5 amazing leaders in the design who are going to help me and Ladies at UX and you to have hopefully a wonderful discussion around that topic. So, as a first panelist today, I would like to invite to take the black chair Jamie Teresuk. And I know that Jamie is a product director with 2 decades of experience in the design. And she has led many international teams around the world with different solutions and different applications, tasks. I know that Jenny is originally from Portland, and she moved to the Netherlands in 2011. And today she is working in TopTal, one of the sponsors of Ladies at UX. And yeah, and I know that you are being a delivery manager there, and actually in general you are a design lead yourself, and you have a lot of experience there. So please welcome Jamie. Okay. As a second speaker and a second panelist, I would like to welcome Anna Frohoop, who has more than 15 years of experience it's in diverse design solutions, combining a strong mix of holistic UX leadership expertise with art direction and conceptual design. I know that since 2014, Anna is a part of UX Academy, which has to deal a lot with the sponsor of the Ladies at UX as well, I think. And I know that you have a very broad international freelance experience. Yeah, so I think you will be adding a great addition to the panel today. Please welcome Anna. The third speaker of today and the third panelist of today is Sevin Osman. And I was thinking how to introduce Sevin, because I know that you have an interesting mix of expertise there. And Sevin represents a unique mix of a passion for life coaching and the UX consultancy. And we can think, what's the common thing about those 2 things? But if we would be thinking that the life coaching and the UX consultancy is all about the people. So please welcome Sevin to the stage. The fourth panelist today is Coleman Walsh, who been mentioned already earlier. He has over 20 experience in the design field. I know personally Coleman as a lead, as a trainer, as the founder of the UX Academy. I know that you bring a lot of addition to the UX communities, to the UX education, and it's a pleasure to see you so often in Amsterdam. Welcome, Coleman.
Thank you. Do I take box?
Yeah, don't throw it at me. Okay. And last but definitely not least, I would like to welcome Melanie, who is an inspired system thinker and digital strategist. Today, Melanie is the design lead and the strategy lead. I know that in the past, you've been working and coaching design teams as well. This is why I think you will be a great addition to the topic today as well. Please welcome Melanie. And last but also not least, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Nadia. You may know my face from Ladies at UX previous events. I'm trying to be active in the UX communities around Amsterdam. Today I'm working as the UX manager at the GitLab, the fully remote company, so love talking about those kind of topics. And I'm proud and I'm very happy to be here today, supporting Ladies at UX Amsterdam again, and meeting every one of you, and yeah, hopefully we're going to have a great time today. Before we're going to actually go, sorry, I forgot this slide, which is pretty important. A little bit about of the setup today. That's we're going to dive into the panel discussion for about an hour, a bit more, an hour and a half. We'll see how that goes. And then at the end, we will have some time to finish up the nice food and have some networking as well. So that's just for them.
Ooh, I love your mustache.
Thank you very much. Well, so much for sneaking in.
Can't sneak anywhere but that.
That's true.
Yes, and I have a small request for everyone here today. Because this is a panel discussion, I would like us to be feeling like we are basically having a discussion with friends, right? I would like everyone to feel at home, to bring up questions. We're going to be having a discussion with the hope that you're going to be interrupting us kindly and providing your opinion, raising your questions, sharing your feedback. So please do not hesitate to do that. We have that beautiful box to throw at you if you would like to raise a question.
That's what it's for. Okay.
Shall we practice it?
Please raise a hand. And to encourage everyone to speak up, we actually will have 5 presents for the 5 best questions at the end, which our dear panelists will choose. And this is a small video about Timmy as a present.
Dynamics. How you work together as a team and interact with one another significantly influences a team performance and job satisfaction. How often do you and your team talk about your team dynamics? Due to our day-to-day business, this happens far too little, even though it can help a lot. Meet Teamy. Teamy helps you develop healthy team dynamics. It's a practical online scan which makes it easier to talk about what's going on in your team. The team is able to see which opportunities for improvement exist, and Teamy will help you to actually use these opportunities. How does it work? With only a few clicks of a button, you can send a Teamy invitation email to your team members. All team members then assess a couple of thought-provoking statements in the form of a game. These statements concern the team and what they think about their own job.
If you would be curious to see more, please raise interesting questions. This is an amazing tool for basically assessing the health of your team. I think it's useful for you as a leader or for your design members or for anyone who is just interested in increasing the maturity of the teams in your organization. So please be active today as well. Support us with that. All right, I think that's a great time just to kick off. So as I mentioned in the past, the topic that we collected you for today, we collected our amazing panelists as well today. We're going to be talking about empathy in leadership. And it's more going to be in relation to the design leadership, I guess, because this is, we have a lot of the design representative today. But basically, empathy as an important skill in leadership in general. And the funny and the interesting thing that according to a lot of the studies that have been done by many universities around the world, empathy was rated as the most needed skill in the leaders, among the leaders. And I've seen a lot of quotes, for example, like being able to listen and respond with empathy is overwhelmingly the one interaction skill that outshines all of the other skills. There were a lot of researchers that supported this fact. And I've seen a lot of other quotes, like, for example, empathy is a universal team value that promotes high commitment and cooperation in the workspace. I think this just proves that without empathy, you cannot really build a team. Without a team, you cannot really build an organization. Without an organization, you cannot make your business shine. So it sounds like empathy is a very important thing for us as leaders, but also for our team members to receive it in order to be committed to the work and committed to the success of the organization. Today, if you're going to Google for, what are those skills that a leader needs, I think like empathy for sure will be in the top 3, if not the first thing. With all of this being said, our panelists, myself, we've been wondering, is empathy simply overrated? Is it just another trend like all of those other things? Or maybe not, or maybe is it still that important? So therefore, I would like to deep dive into the discussion today. And I think the good starting point for the discussion is to talk about what is actually leadership, empathy, sorry. What does it mean? And maybe what is empathy not, right? Like what is not an empathy? We've been, for the preparation of this talk, we've been discussing with our panelists that there are 2 levels of empathy out there. It can be like an individual level, like us as from person to anticipate feelings, to understand somebody else's situation. And there is a business perspective of that, where we as designers can play a really important role. So let's cover those one by one, right? And let's start maybe first from the personal or individual empathy. And I know, Conman, that you had a really interesting story there to tell about the situation in your family to help us understand what can be an empathy on the individual or personal level.
Yeah, thank you. So, so one of my kids, Christian, he's 7 years old, he's autistic, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions about autistic people out there. He's kind of what would have been known as Asperger's. So he's walking and he's talking and he's going to school and he's a happy guy. I think one of the misconceptions is that, people with autism are kind of like robots, but he's not. He's very affectionate, funny little fella, but he does have issues with empathy. And it's not as if he has no empathy. Again, that's another misconception. And if you think about, like, empathy is quite complex when we look into it, but at a very basic level, what empathy, my understanding anyway, is that empathy is, can I understand what you're thinking and feeling, and do I know why you're thinking and feeling that? And Christian would have that, no problem. He'd understand if you're happy or sad or angry and all that. But there are lots of nuances and subtleties around empathy, and that's where he struggles. And it has a really big impact on his life. So just a couple of examples would be that body language, right, is if you want to understand what someone's thinking or feeling, a lot of it is communicated through body language, and he's not good at that. So if he is telling us for the, 100th time how, that this is his favorite Beatles song, and this is his favorite Beatle, and this is his favorite Beatle album, and this is his, this, he doesn't pick up the subtle cues that, I'm a bit bored with this. He's so enthusiastic and he wants to share it with you. He doesn't pick that up. And also when even though he is empathetic, he doesn't show it as well as he could. So his body language is bad. So if you're talking to him, he won't look you in the eye. He might turn away. He might be all fidgety. That's actually his way of concentrating, but it doesn't look like he's concentrating or listening, and that can turn people off. So it does, on a personal level, what you see is people who struggle with empathy, it is a disability, and particularly when it comes to socializing and making friends, and that's where he struggles. Yeah.
Right. So the conclusion that we can make out of that empathy on the personal level could be anticipating those reactions, like how interested your person who you're talking to is in what you're discussing. Are you bored? Have you heard this before already or not?
Stuff that we all take for granted, and we just do it naturally. And it's just fascinating to see someone who doesn't, who's going to have to, our job now as parents is to try and teach them these things. So teach them these skills that we all just pick up just like that from when we're kids, and he's going to have to learn them, and it's not easy.
Right. Sevin, I know that earlier we talked about, now switching, we talked a little bit about the personal, individual empathy. What can you tell us about how can be empathy seen on the business side of the things? Earlier you've been mentioning that there are a few types of those.
Yeah, this is relevant for both the personal and the business, but we usually tend to look at empathy as one thing. It's like perspective taking, but there's actually two types. You have affective empathy, where you take on somebody else's emotions. So if somebody's really sad, like your friend is really sad, you're there with them, you're hugging them, you're also getting a bit sad, you're going along with their feeling. And that's one type of empathy. And then you also have another one, which is called cognizant empathy. And that is the ability to understand, like what Coleman said, where somebody's coming from, how they might be feeling, why they're feeling that way. But you're still able to step outside of that feeling and also take all other perspectives into account. So your friend is sad, but you don't lose yourself in their sadness and your own sadness. You're actually also able to think, oh, what might help them right now? Or how can I best support them? So it's a much broader way of being empathetic. And that's the one that in business is really important, especially in leadership, because if your colleague is, or your team member is coming to you and they're crying because something happened, you're not going to be super helpful if you sit there and cry with them. So you need to also be able to think, oh, okay, so this is happening right now. What is their workload? How can I help with that? What do they need now? Do they need paid time off, or do they need a ride somewhere? Whatever it is. And also you have the business, like, oh, we have a client. How can I also take care of the client? So it's much broader. It doesn't mean you don't understand. It just means that you are able to be much more supportive in a holistic way instead of losing yourself in emotion. And that's what I think. That's a very important differentiation between types of empathy. It's not always beneficial to go along with somebody's feelings.
Right. Yeah, this is a great description for that, I feel like. And when talking about empathy in business concept or in a personal concept, I'm curious, what does it actually mean like to be that empathetic person? Or especially for us as leaders, what can it mean to be an empathetic leader? I would like to ask Jamie to answer that question. How could you describe a leader in the organization who could be empathetic?
Sure. I think, I don't know how many of you have read Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor. I think it does a really good job of describing how we can be empathetic, but also, be able to be honest as well, to be candid in certain situations. And, that empathy, like what Sevin is saying, differentiating it between the personal and the business side of things. Not only, do you need to care about the individual person, but you also need to care about the business as well. So it's really important to make sure that you're balancing that as best as possible. Yeah.
Curious if anyone in the crowd has an experience or example of a really empathetic maybe manager who you work for, or maybe the opposite of that?
Opposite.
Yeah?
Please share.
You want to take the microphone and share that with us?
There you go.
So,
Awesome.
so my previous PO, he was like, the first time when I present my design to him, he was like, "What kind of crap is it?" I was like, it cannot be possibly that wrong, right? And then I noticed it's just like this to everybody. Or when my colleague was presenting his design, he said, "I want a real designer work on it." Like, what kind of feedback is that?
Wow.
In cases like this, do you think
He
that,
shouldn't be a manager.
and maybe something I would like to hear Melanie's perspective here, do you think that maybe the product manager that you worked for was new to their role?
No, he's very experienced in his role. And then I was told he was much better when he gave those kind of comments. So I couldn't imagine how he was like before. And then it was actually one of my questions that I do think empathy is very different, but we do have those managers and they do get things done and delivered with zero empathy. So I just wonder how you guys look at that.
That's a really good question. I think coming from, there's two sides to that. You can have people who are really good at delivering or super talented, but is that worth the cost to the organization and to the people involved, right? Because if you have someone who's been in an organization with zero empathy for a long time, it says something about the culture.
Yeah,
And
back to what Coleman was saying earlier, some people have to really learn empathy, but I think often we have to unlearn a lot of the sort of toxic behaviors that organizations have taught us or have taught them are okay. And so we often see in like large organizations or organizations that have a very sort of delivery only mentality at whatever cost, a growth mentality, that people have forgotten their innate empathy or their ability to really approach things as a person. And so the job as a leader, both as an empathetic leader and as a good leader, is to see that, to see those things. And I think it's the responsibility of those people in leadership to listen and to look at the things that are not being said or the discomfort that you feel when someone's talking to you that way. And they're the people who can, I think, best tackle that too, by showing people if they complain, oh, this PO is really toxic, and to say, okay, well, maybe growth isn't the most important thing. Maybe the happiness and the health of my people is a more important thing than delivering. And I think we're changing. I think the industry is changing to say that growth isn't worth toxicity. You can see that in some of the shifts that are happening in bigger companies, but it's still not enough. And I think, me personally, I don't agree that kind of delivery at the cost of kindness and empathy is worth it. It's never worth it. And I've always taken a stand at that. And I think probably a lot of people on this panel have taken a stand at that too, because I don't think we'd be sitting here discussing empathy on the panel if that wasn't the case. And so we have to unlearn a lot of bad behaviors or have our people unlearn bad behaviors. And I think you can do that in many ways, whether it's trainings, whether it's just calling out that behavior as not acceptable.
I certainly wouldn't enable that behavior from your product owner. I would, if I was you, I probably wouldn't be working there.
You left.
Okay.
Actually, it is in the top 5 reasons why people leave companies. Bad culture and not feeling recognized, and also a bad relationship with your boss are the main reasons. So short term he might get some stuff done, and long term the company's gonna just run empty essentially.
Yeah, he did complain people going too often.
And that was kind of the archetypical role of the advertising creative director, right? Like this kind of bigger than life person who shot you down, the sort of Mad Men mentality, right? And that was successful. And so you can, if I were to single that person out, you'd want to understand, okay, where did this come from? Were they enabled by people to say, yeah, you're great, to do these behaviors? But you can do that if you're looking outside, but to actually day-to-day deal with that, it's super exhausting and can cause a lot of burnout.
But isn't it, I think back in the day that I think that would have been the to be a good manager, you had to be a ball breaker, and you had to crack the whip, and that's how you got stuff done, because everybody's lazy, right? And you have to whip them. Metaphorically. But it's just amazing and I think we've all come across it, but to think that still exists, it seems like so out of step with the way things are going, and counterproductive as well. I'm sure you didn't get the best out of people by doing that, and it shouldn't be mutually exclusive, You don't have to being productive and being an asshole. I mean, you don't have to. They don't have to go together.
There was a comment over there. A question? Can you comment? Microphone.
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry. Okay, here we go.
Good shot.
Thank you. Is it on?
Yes.
So I can relate to this scenario, but I also was wondering if you have any experience with kind of a fine line between empathetic behaviors and cultural differences, because I've hired someone, for example, on my team, and at first I thought they were empathetic, and then as the month or two go by, I find a lot of snide remarks and things that's not so empathetic. And then I'm like trying to figure out in my brain, like, okay, this can't be. Like, I hired this person and it really made me think that he was empathetic, but then it's strange in the working place how these things coming out. And then I started to look deeper, like, okay, what's the cultural background? He's from a different country from me. What's the culture there? And trying to piece together that maybe the difference is the cultural difference, but how do I bridge this to guide him to be more empathetic and not be doing, like, it's behavioral and cultural. It goes so deep. You can't change those things, but how can you guide someone to be more a team player that's more empathetic and not so negative? Do you have
That's a
any
great
experience
question.
with this?
Do you mind if I actually take that one? Because so I work remotely. I work for with people all over the world. So coming into contact with people that are multicultural is basically part of my everyday. And I actually just came back from this conference in London called Leading Design. I don't know if you all are familiar with it. It's really fantastic. I highly recommend going. There was actually a talk. It was just last week actually. There was a talk given by, I forget the gentleman's last name, Faisal, I think is his first name. He was talking about the cultural differences in communication, and there was a lot of study around that. There was a whole spectrum of, if you're from a particular country or a region, sort of the spectrum of softness of communication versus sort of the hardness and bluntness, right? So we're in the Netherlands. I think we all know that some of these more northern countries have a little bit more directness, and some people can really appreciate that, and while some people, let's just say, I'm from the United States, I'll say as American, if I was in America and I would have been approached by, that sort of Dutch directness, I might not have been as open to it as I am now, right, having lived here for many years. And I think it's not just our responsibility to be able to communicate to the people from different backgrounds, but also it's not just how they're communicating to us, but how can you communicate to them in a way that they can hear you and that they can respect you as well. Exactly. If you're soft and they actually need to hear sort of more direct communication and feedback, they're not going to process that the same way that you might. So I think it's really important to understand those differences and indeed have empathy for them and their particular communication style and their cultural background.
Okay. Where is this person from? You outside?
I don't know. It's a small community, so I don't want to say exactly, but Eastern Europe, and I'm North American living here for 13, 14 years, so I'm very, also what she said, like I'm used to the bluntness and it's fine for me, but also the gender difference, so you have like male and maybe more like a chauvinistic attitude I heard from someone. I don't know, I'm not familiar with Eastern European.
My boyfriend is from Eastern Europe, he's from it is different.
Yeah,
but at the same time, though, it sounds like you're having doubts and you're questioning yourself and everything. But someone gave me a great quote from a football man, Alex Ferguson, because I think everybody who leads a team has personnel issues, right?
Yeah.
And some people just don't fit, And he gave me this great quote, and he said, "When in doubt, there is no doubt." If you're having doubts, it's probably not, probably not right. You can agonize over what can I do, make it better, change it, and blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's just cut it off.
I know, but you can only cut off so much with employment contracts and stuff, so you have to you have to work, and you don't want to have a negative feeling going to work and with your other teammates. You want to make it positive. So in the end, I can say with my personal experience, it did run into a clash where I had a very difficult talk. And because of, like, you're talking about the respect, I was losing, his respect for me was going down until this conflict arose. And then I am not confrontational, so I was like, oh, this is struggle for me. And then as soon as we had this really hard talk, the respect went up through the roof. So it's a bit changing now, but I noticed that, and I thought maybe you guys had experience that you could share.
Yeah, so he needed to be challenged directly.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. So this is actually a really great personal situation that I think very nicely segues into our next question that I wanted to deep dive into is actually, can empathy be learned? And I'm curious, and I know that we discussed this with you, in your experience of growing design leaders, like, how do you make a person learn that thing? And can it be learned? Does it mean that somebody has more opportunities to do that from being born, for example?
In the past, I thought, okay, everyone has to be as much as empathic as possible. When I experience this in the UX field, then I get the insight of, okay, do you have to be as much as empathic as possible, always. Every team lead or every team member, and that's that was I was wondering about this question. And when I give now trainings in UX Academy, and I meet a lot of programmers, and they're sometimes empathic, but sometimes they're not so empathic. But they are very good and very valuable team members to the team. So in that way, I thought, okay, maybe not every team member has to be as much as empathic, because they're still very, very valuable to the team. So, and I think, of course, you can teach empathy. For example, Brian Pagan has great creative empathy workshops. He's doing a great job over there. But you can teach it on a certain level, but you, at a certain point, you have to accept that someone is not that empathic if you want to wish he could be that empathic. So, yeah, that was my point of view. And as a design leader, I will recommend that see who is more empathic than the other team member of your team. And you can combine them together. Hey, let's work them together and instruct the more empathic ones with the less empathic ones.
Mm-hmm.
And you can,
So you think that softens out the...
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a big issue if you have a lot of team members, they are not that empathic if you wish.
Yes.
You have to let them work them together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Simon, I'm curious.
You can teach a bit, but not that much. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Microphone probably best.
Who? Oh gosh.
Nice catch.
Thank you. At Cooper, the design agency that's no longer Cooper. They used to have a separate role called the design communicator. So you had designers and then the design communicator, and the design communicator would present or would work on the presentation of the design to make sure that it would land nicely, that it would be received well. So they accepted that not everyone was great at communicating or seeking feedback or receiving feedback in the right way, in a constructive way. So they made it a separate role. Which meant that other people didn't have to develop those skills, at least while they were working at that company. I don't know what happened to them afterwards, if they. But so they made it a separate role to at least be able to talk about the work and be receptive to feedback. That may be one solution where you don't have to train everyone in a particular skill.
Yeah. I wanted, I will come back to, I just really wanted to see the perspective of the life coach, right? How do you help people to grow empathy?
My background also a little bit is in developmental psychology, so I studied actually a lot about how empathy is learned. Actually, it's just a natural progression. At around age 4 or 5, children learn the skill of perspective taking. That's when their brains are ready. So a younger child, you can tell them all you want to think about your friend's point of view, but they won't be able to because they simply don't have a brain yet. So every child, other than obviously really bad psychopaths or some brain damage to children, everybody will grow up to know to be empathic. I agree, some people express it differently, and I also don't know if you can say they are less empathic or they're just empathic in a different way. And my personal view on any kind of bad or destructive behavior that we have as adults is simply that we were punished for something else when we were in our lives, some point in our lives. So I think you unlearn empathy through, also what Melanie said earlier, through some sort of bad experiences. For example, if you're, I'll give a personal one where I had a lot of friends in elementary school. I was quite a popular girl, and then I went to high school, and I was new there, and I didn't know anybody, and I got really bullied. So after that, even though I was quite a caring person, I always wanted the best for other people when I was smaller, I had to kind of develop some sort of defense, and my defense was fuck you all. So I became a real rebel, and I was also known as the school bitch at some point. So you could say that I'm not an empathetic person, but it's not because I didn't want to be. I was kind of punished for being the way that I was. And then so as an adult, and also in coaching, I think it's about relearning new things that you might get punished for sometimes, but you just have to persevere. If you want to change it, you can change it. So yeah, I tend to go towards people who are inherently good. And
That's interesting way of saying somebody is empathetic and somebody is empathetic in a different way.
Yeah,
I find that really interesting. You had a comment earlier.
Yes.
You want to
A
catch?
question.
Diving also to the previous round, but it's just really nice what you just said, because okay, so at my company it's an agency, and at this point I am I'm really for like getting rid of this madman culture and hustle culture, which at an agency it's like residual. Still there are people who take it with them. I see absolutely no benefit to it in any way for anything. My question to you is not about like empathy for my team that I am leading, but more of how it can be used with the other leads, which are usually leads from other departments that are maybe more like client-facing or a bit old-school advertising-ish, because it's easier to do in UX, right? Because it's also part of our job, so we are trained to do that. And I can say some, like also from my previous job, I'm not like all like huggy empathy, like pretty pragmatic. So there are like people who are like simply assholes, and like you just have to kind of like remove them. I for myself developed some like tests, like how far I let people go, because first they do it like they probably don't know. Second they do it, they just made a mistake. Third they do it, it's a pattern. So but at the moment I'm working with people that, to your example, I think are inherently good. They don't do it on purpose, and the problem is not even that they don't understand what their team members are going through. It's just that they learned that like they were grown in the industry this way, so they think it's the good way to raise other kids. So other the like interns and the junior staff to grow in their career, and it's not that word anymore. So how do I use empathy, and how do I like open this discussion with them to shift a little bit their behavior, and without being afraid that like they don't know what to do in this new world, or like losing face? That's like a big issue. Yeah.
I think sometimes we have to call it out at forums like this to start with, but also if you're a lead, if you're in a position of a leadership role, you must have meetings with the other leads. Or if not, you should start having these meetings so there's like some cross-pollination and communication and understanding. And we tolerate a lot of these behaviors because we think it's just the way it should be done, or we're not sure, we don't want to ruffle feathers, but we have to take a stand, especially as leaders, to say that this isn't valuable for our clients, for the employees, and you know, you have to figure out, is it an individual perspective? Is it that that person has felt this is the way they can succeed, and how do you deal with that on the individual level? Or can you as a company say, no, we know the value of empathy, we know the value of inclusion and collaboration, and can we take a stand and ensure that we approach this as leaders? And so I think it depends on the structure of your company, and also on whether or not people at the very top have the same perspective. Because if they don't, and they want to hustle, and they want to grow, and they want to continue having that sort of method, then you're going to have to start there at convincing them and helping to change them. And you know, I have a question for you first, Lynn, around the psychology aspect. Often now I find that becoming a design leader and having these conversations, I need to know so much about like psychology and behavior and development and all these things. And you know, the only way I know any of this or can say this is through experience and making mistakes and keep growing. But how much of our responsibility is it to fix these things or to understand the psychology behind it, and how much is it just how can we better tackle these things?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's different for every person. It's kind of what kind of role do you want to take inside your company? If you want to focus more on people, then I feel pick up some books about it. Like actually, Melanie gave me Radical Candor, and I loved it. So things like that, and just books like that, and then practicing. Also, to your question, I have a question back for you. Do you think this person or people, do they trust you? Do they trust that you want what's best for them?
Yeah, well, so I think I have a pretty good standing in my company. We like on good terms, and they do trust my expertise, and they have no,
you as a person,
yeah,
care and love and want them to succeed as a person. person, separate from your expertise?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Okay, because I feel,
The problem is not how they behave with me, the problem is how they behave with their other.
No, yeah, I understood. The reason I asked that is because feedback is obviously the only way you can help people.
Yeah.
So you mirror what they're doing by telling them, but you cannot tell somebody who doesn't trust you. So that was why that's super important. And then consistently giving feedback. And if people are stuck, you can also give suggestions on how to change things. And you can never change somebody else.
No.
That's just a given. You can, if they wanted to change, you can support them. They still have to do it themselves. It's not your responsibility. I guess to that also a little bit. It's never your responsibility to change something for someone who doesn't want to change. But feedback is something we don't tend to do.
Yeah. But you can also be a champion in your own organization to empower these types of cultural, things that we find really important, right? So if you have these sort of siloed departments that they're not able to really even understand each other, that's a big problem. That's a problem that's coming from the top. And if you don't have that, champion in your organization, become one.
Yeah, but the thing is, actually, that's what happened, and that's how the whole thing emerged. That in my team, I built a culture of growth, and people actually feel very good in the team, and they are doing excellent work, and everybody got promoted. As they do really, really good progress. And then people from other teams started to come to me, and other disciplines, and they were like, "Yeah, I wish I was a UXer. My boss is doing this and that and da." And I'm like, "Okay, I want to have these guys, but I also understand where they come from. That they have to have this cool facade, and I cannot challenge that and make them okay, yeah, now you will be the soft empathetic leader. No, but in practice they can keep that whatever, look cool as they want. But in the what I want is to kind of help them shift to keep whatever they want, but also change the behavior in a way that also the people who are in their team, they can be themselves and grow in their own way without this madman culture being
I think
put on them.
as Seven said, is just live by be an example to them, and really just hold a mirror up to them, as far as this is what we're portraying as people who care about empathy, care about other people, care about other departments, and their organizational needs.
I'm also not
and you can't change other people, right?
So I think this is actually a really good point to try to maybe flip the medal and talk about the other side. In the situations like that, or in general, I had in my life experience where some leader wants to really support their team and really cares about them, and in some cases it may be even seen hey, this person is over-caring. And I'm curious to hear your perspective to the question, how do you make sure that when you're trying to be empathetic, you are not overdoing that? What differentiates, can you be actually too empathetic as a leader?
Can I just, sorry, I know it's really annoying to go back to the
previous,
but
sure.
I just wanted something to say, because we're talking about how to use empathy to kind of overcome this cultural thing, right? And I think, again, go back to the basics. It's showing those people the effect that their behaviour has on the other person. And what I found is really useful is just forensically, in a non-threatening way, taking someone through, look and say, look, this incident happened with intern A, let's say, last week, right? I understand why you did that approach, it makes sense in a circumstance, but this is what the other person was trying to do. This was their situation. This is how they experience your intervention, whatever it be, or whatever it is. This is how they feel about it, and what do you think now? And I think it takes a lot of time to work that out, and you have to go. It's like you're like a private investigator. The person, put the case together and talk to them, but it really does, and I've seen it. People just casually do things without having any idea of the impact it has on somebody else. It's not that they're not empathetic; they just didn't think. But when you step them through that, they're like, "Oh God, can't believe I did that." And that sort of thing, I think, can work, unless they're, unless they don't care that much, unless they're the wrong cultural fit for the organisation, and that's a different problem then.
Yeah, so it's like giving a feedback, right?
I think the next question about it is really interesting because empathy isn't always doing the softest or the most comfortable thing, right? Like empathy, as we said on the business perspective, is looking at things in a more holistic manner. And so if there's someone like in your team who's super toxic, removing that person is more empathetic to the overall organization, right? And so people have confused being an empathetic leader with being a soft leader, with being weak, and that's just because of that toxicity kind of growing on its own, and really the cultural aspect of saying, no, we need to be this like madman sort of thing, or many different ways. And I was thinking of an example, I think, when we were preparing for this, where I had a person on my team, quite junior. He was very confident to a point, to be cocky, and so he thought that he was, very good at his job and very convincing to all the clients, but he was just not. He didn't have the experience to back up some of the things that he was promising, and so it was becoming very challenging for the client. There was a lot of failure, a lot of mistakes, a lot of wasted money, a lot of toxicity in the team, and eventually we gave him a lot of chances to change his behavior and a lot of one-on-one feedback, and he was just totally resistant to listening because he thought that he was doing all the right things because he'd been taught, whether it was in school or whether it was in his sort of family life, that just being the best, being the most confident, believing you can win means that you're great. And so what I did in the end was, with the leadership of my company, we decided not to renew his contract. But we told him, I think 5 months before the end of his contract, that we were not going to renew. So we gave him time to find another role. And in those 5 months, it was a bit awkward, right? Because he didn't have a lot of work to do. We wanted to be kind and we wanted to be empathetic. He was going out and interviewing and kept being told, you're not senior enough, you need to lose the attitude, you need to stop being cocky. And after all this external feedback, he finally came back and he could put himself in my shoes and in the head of the company's shoes and realize, oh crap, you were right. He had to really hit rock bottom and learn for himself that this attitude was limiting him in his growth as a person. And so my empathy was to him, quite harsh. But at the end, he started to realize and learn from it, and he became I don't follow his career, but I think he landed somewhere and was able to grow because he had a little less of an ego and a little bit more of a listening ear. And so that wasn't being soft. In fact, he accused me of being quite harsh and not approachable. But to me, as a leader, that was making it better for the rest of the team.
And also for him.
It's also great, but sometimes giving people the harsh feedback is...
It's what they need.
You wouldn't equate that with empathy, but if you actually care about them improving as a professional or whatever, then sometimes you have to do it. And I hate doing it, and it's, conflict and you avoid like the plague. But you have to, and people appreciate it, that's empathy as well. So there's different shades of it.
That's a great example.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Oh, yeah, okay. Oops. So I come more from the innovation side of UX. So actually, as the leader, we've always used empathy to kind of come to these conclusions about the ultimate product, because a lot of what we're dealing with is there's limited knowledge. It's more qualitative, it's more gut feeling kind of stuff. And so what you're saying is actually, it made me think about, I've had to teach my team to use empathy for product, right? To get to the conclusion of what is the best user experience, because we have to go off of, no data here, right? So we have to use a skill for the product. And I'm wondering if it's possible, right, to have a person who maybe personally might lack empathy, but can they use empathy as part of their UX role, to create this good user experience? So if they lack their own empathy, how can they put themselves in the shoes of a user?
Do you think they can?
Well, I guess I've been fortunate enough where I've had great teams and we've become families, and We've been through hell and back with product launches, and we have each other's back. And I think there's just respect and kindness in the team. So I don't know, but it's made me think a bit, right, about, are they really using the empathy to get to that conclusion, and can they if they don't even have it themselves? But any bad apples.
Yeah, do they have it is the question.
Yeah.
Really haven't gotten there. They are inherently empathetic. And so I think actually I find quite often now in this industry that people are more able to be empathetic on a business side for the user or the client, and not so much for their teams or their stakeholders. So I think you have to figure out how to get through to them through cut through their conditioning, cut through their lessons and learning. And I think team workshops can really help with that, or role playing, or scenario building, to make them learn the consequences of behavior or not being empathetic.
Yeah. First question was there, right? And that's back to you.
Thank you.
Here you go.
Hi. I had a question. I was delivering feedback to my colleague, and I took a while to put it together and put it nicely, but there was a lot of harsh feedback, like sometimes this person wasn't modest enough and he was bragging about something really in team's face. So when I delivered the feedback, he actually didn't see that as a feedback. He was like explaining himself so much that, yeah, I understand, but maybe it's a personal thing, so maybe we're just different personalities. So I was wondering, what do you do when the person doesn't feel that this feedback is applicable for them? Should you explain more, or... Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like a character issue for him, right? That he's not really able to hear feedback, and that may be a problem for you and your team. As far as what you do with that, I think probably have one-on-one with him and discuss that as maybe more about his characters. That listening is really important. We can't be empathetic without listening. So I think that's really essential.
Feedback about his attitude to feedback.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know, I look back when I was younger and I go, oh my God, I must be so bad. I get feedback and I'm like, what? I can't believe you said that about me, It could be just a maturity thing, like the guy that you were talking about. Now that doesn't solve your immediate problem, that you're not there to, you don't probably have a 10-year time span with them, but just maybe let it sink in a bit, come back to them, like you say, and let's talk about your attitude feedback.
Yeah. Indeed.
I think it's also nicely connects to the point that you earlier made about the trust. How I actually have dealt with that in the past is involving more people in giving that feedback to that guy or girl in some kind of a workshop or some other session, because the question of the trust, I love that you pointed out, because that's the background for any type of, because if person does not trust your opinion, he simply doesn't listen, or she.
But don't you think it's going to be like hunting this person, like gathering together and providing this feedback? It feels like an intervention, You
have to be smart. Yeah, you have to be smart about that. And to earlier point, there are a lot of different plays for the teams that you can, like in some kind of a not direct way to deliver that feedback, like run a workshop around something like about the team in general, and make sure that you cover that question so that feedback comes up to him, not directly but indirectly. And a nice advice for that, the Atlassian Team Health Playbook. They have a lot of interesting examples. I'll post it in the meetup. It's really interesting. I have to come back here first with the question.
I want to just say one more thing.
Yeah.
Just because I slightly disagree with the thing that it's just his character. It's insecurity, generally it's fear. So yeah, also be a little bit tolerant, because people show resistance when they know something is actually kind of true, but they actually don't have the inner strength yet to face it. So this person probably knows that this is an issue, but he's just too scared right now. So also, I would be too quick to condone and say, yeah, your character is not suited.
Yeah, that's probably the wrong term. He's probably being defensive.
It's defensive.
Yeah.
It's almost always.
It's very hard though, isn't it, when someone, they might be insecure, but their outward expression is cocky or...
Yeah, that's something
I know.
Defense, yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
And that's where the trust is. Sorry, continue.
You had a question.
Another question, a comment. Actually, two small comments. So I will like to address the previous topic regarding whether it's possible to teach empathy. Thanks to my daughter, who is 5 years old now, I discovered the Montessori education and nonviolent communication. And I think being a leader and making somebody else to be empathic, it's first up to us to be empathic and to learn how to communicate. So I come from Israel, and in Israel it's a very direct plus aggressive communication. So yeah, it's like taking the Netherlands but one step higher. And when I moved here and started my role here in a company, I needed to rewire myself into making more gentle and more effective communication. And I think it starts, and I really recommend for all of us and you, including myself, I'm still learning, to read about nonviolent communication, because it really helps to speak. We usually tend to kind of blame the other side, or say, you are not empathic enough, you are not modest enough, or whatever. But when we speak from our point of view, for example, I feel that you sometimes being, whatever, fill the gap by yourself. So if we speak for ourselves and how it makes us feel, the other side is actually more responsive to the feedback and more responsive to be open to that. So it works with kids and it works with adults, and I really made that switch, and I often, like 90% of the time, I succeed doing that because I come from the point of view of, okay, so I feel that perhaps there is another way of doing that, or I feel that perhaps we could search for another solution. So it's a bit of mix of politics with empathy and So
maybe that's a great solution, Daria, to your question, because it's like talking about your feelings and not like saying, hey, you are being, not judging, not
exactly how it makes you feel and how do you see it, instead of saying you're not doing this enough, or you're not kind enough, or whatever.
Non-violent communication?
Yes.
It's a really good book. I've also read it.
I think
it's a whole institute.
You had a question.
Yeah, but it actually, sorry?
What do you mean by not violent? Is it not physically violent or more?
Well, preferably not. No, but it's about, for example, my parents are from Ukraine. I was born there, and the Soviet education was really, many can relate. Yeah, it's like blaming and criticizing, and
so that's
I needed to rewire myself, first of all for the sake of my daughter, because I didn't want to raise her that way. So I needed to rewire myself how to communicate in a respectful and gentle way, even when it's harsh feedback. And it really helps. It really helps in communicating with, it's much harder with adults, but it really helps. And I wanted just to point out that in Montessori, also recommend reading about it. Part of teaching empathy to kids is putting them in not one age group, but groups of 3 ages. So 3 to 6, 6 to 9. So they actually learn to take care of the smallest in the group, and then the grown-ups are learning to lead, but gently. And it's something that I think throughout the years I see on my daughter as well. She's in a Montessori school. It really has an impact. So it can be done also with adults.
Can you throw a microphone over there?
Yeah.
And I would like to.
I'm actually going to build up on your comment, and because I came late, but apparently I came in the most interesting part of the conversation.
I know you missed. That was good.
Good one. I like that. But the question is, to what extent do we actually design for empathy to allow, because what you said is my 5-year-old is doing this and she's teaching me, and for her I practice this, and it's fine, we can do that. But to what extent we can do that with adults and allow them to have part of our part of our empathy and to see our goodness and kindness without abusing it. Because the idea that our colleague in the back outlined is something that comes across in many environments where I see the question too soft. Like at some point, if you allow these kind of things to happen more often, people take you for granted. So how do we overcome that, and what is the extent of design that we could put into our relationships and into our work environments, and not just work environments, but yeah, into our products, so that we would not cultivate a generation that taps into the empathy of some and benefits, and just takes that for granted and continues to be arrogant, pushy because they've got traumas. Because what you said there is very valid to me, and it resonates to me very well, because I came to Amsterdam coming from a Romanian background, communist, and I went to creative leadership school where there were a lot of thought leaders, important people, people from all over the world with a different wiring of the brain, and they had empathy towards me to the point that at some point my own trauma would become too much for them to bear, to allow me to still have space to express myself, despite the fact that, yeah, in some meetings I would take up all the time. In some other meetings I would want my ideas to be voiced out. In other meetings I would dismiss somebody's idea because it was not logic, and I was judging it from a rational perspective, and they were putting it from an emotional perspective, and I was not able to see their perspective. And these kind of things, at some point we need to stop them. And how do we stop them in a way that, yeah, I mean, people like me, I had to go through my own trauma to realize, okay, I need to stop this behavior. I'm a shitty person. How do I overcome this? And I went through 3 years of therapy, but not everybody is able to do that. So how do we design environments that enable that space for people who might not come from a bad intention, but they do behave in a way that, so it's an extensive question, but
I think if I just have a stab at that, because it's something that we're trying to do in our own organisation, because we're small now, but we're getting bigger every month, and it's like the culture has kind of evolved naturally, and it's a nice culture, but we know that as there's more people in there,
you don't take
it
for granted.
You have to codify it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So we're having a session and a way day in a couple of weeks' time where we're going to work out the culture. And the definition of culture, I think, or one definition anyway, is for an organisation is like, this is how we do things around here, right? And if you codify that, not in a cheesy way where it's like, oh, caring, whatever else, it's going to be useful, practical stuff. And I've seen this myself working for a company in the States where they had their core values, but they were really good. And one of them was about openness. And it allowed you, right, in a meeting to say, look, in the spirit of openness, I am going to, because you're in America, people aren't really direct there, but it allowed you to be direct. And you were able to use the culture to not make it personal, to challenge somebody. And I think if you design a culture and codify it and say, this is how we do things around here, if people behave in a way that isn't in keeping with the culture, then you can point them out. And it's not personal, it's not, I think, that you're being wrong. It's like, I'm not sure that this is in keeping with the culture. The culture's over here, it's a separate thing. It's not me versus you. It's like you're out of step with the culture. I think that's one way of, because culture dictates behavior.
It does.
Yes, and maybe it's a nice idea to point someone as an empathy designer. I don't know if it's existing or not, but if one person can take the responsibility of the empathy quality in your team or in your outcomes, in your deliverables, then you covered it. So, and you can use all kinds of tools as an empathy designer. For example, the movie what I wanted to show you.
This is actually a great segue to the next question that I really wanted to cover. It's
Oh yeah, nice.
You want to show the movie first?
I want to show a kind of tool because I'm showing this movie to my students because how to come up with more support in your team for empathy to your stakeholders. If your stakeholders not that empathy enough, come up with a kind of storytelling tool. For example, a movie, and show your stakeholders what kind of behavior, what kind of concerns, what kind of environments or context are your users in? So, yeah, so let's take a look.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So imagine that you are a designer for a new app in a hospital. How to create more support with your stakeholders for this? New storytelling. So you can see now emotions, you can see concerns, and you can see and creating an app for this context, for this end users, is very hard. But there are designers, they have to come up with designs for this context. So, and if you can imagine the difficulties, it's the best tool to show. Okay, yeah. So this is just one tool what you can use to come up with.
Yeah, I actually have a goosebumps. Yeah. Yeah. So I've seen there were a few questions. I think you had a comment, right? Is it related to this topic?
Well, actually,
it's fine.
Yeah. So it's actually related to the previous one because I really want to address that. Can you go back to that slide? This one. Because I do feel like we've been talking about empathy now for quite an hour, and we treat it as an isolated thing in existence. But I think in business especially, empathy is actually also involved with a lot of office politics, power struggles, power dynamics. And actually, I've been accused of being too soft and having no backbone because I was actually having friction with another team lead. So where you have an equal power dynamics. And I decided to get some, how do you say, water to the wine, how do you say it? To give in a bit and have a mutual agreement for a decision. And the founder eventually said to me, you have no backbone. You are too soft. And you are not a leader because you are being too weak. And so I just wondered, what are you thinking about actually empathy in equal power dynamics, where you have to actually fight for a decision with another leader. He's always on the same level, to say, because that's really something very painful for me actually in my company.
Doesn't that have to do with ego as well?
Definitely. So I feel like
it's empathy and ego, because empathy can come from multiple places, just like you said, it's not in isolation, right? So empathy coming from ego is you wanting to show that you're empathetic on purpose. And showing that you're empathetic on purpose does not come from a genuine place. So that usually comes with a dynamic of you wanting to show that you are so soft to prove yourself, whereas the other person is empathetic. He just cries when he sees that movie, which is like genuine empathy. And it has nothing to do with
but what are you, so you mean?
So the ego one, like the ego one is you consciously planting elements of empathy into the conversation so that you would be the one that becomes softer. In a conversation with another manager, you appear to be the one that needs to be protected. So you become a victim. In the victim survival triangle, it's a very important dynamic there that comes into place where there's a powerful person that definitely wants to be the aggressor, he does carry empathy, but he wants to be the aggressor. He wants to position himself this way, and the other person automatically positions themselves as the victim. So what you need to do to not be the soft one or to not have the lack of backbone is to basically shift a little bit his tendency to transform you into a victim and say, look, I see where you're coming from, and I see that you are empathetic, and I also see that you're trying to be empathetic on purpose, which makes it harder for you to implement things right. So would you be willing to be who you are for a little bit and let that ego just show me that you want to be more powerful than me and dominant? Show me that. Show me the worst of you. So that we can deal with that.
There seems to be another perspective as well. Can you throw the microphone there? Maybe you get another advice as well.
Last thing. So I don't think we can act without ego on the workplace. We're not only talking about empathy, like we're all saints, but I do think we have a lot of ego going on, every one of us.
Everyone should read the radical
Is there some tissues in here?
Yeah. What was your comment, or?
Yeah, basically, like this comment has come from the point that this is a personal issue. What you are saying and what you're asking, I think it's more on the company issue level, because if culture in the company says that communication between same power levels should be win or lose, there is always going to be this kind of situations. If on a company level establish that you need to collaborate to have a win-win situation, this kind of questions that someone is to solve is not going to come out, because it's not about someone winning and someone losing. It's about both of you trying to achieve the best outcome for the product, for the company, for the team. So I don't think it's actually a personal issue as it was described. I think people are put in these positions and they play by the rules.
But even if the company culture doesn't have that embedded, you can overcome that by looking at the triangle and just
well, you can't be the only soldier standing in the field.
And I agree with that. I think it really goes back to what we were saying earlier, that if at the top of the company or whatever level you're talking about, but in the power seat of your manager, if he doesn't agree with consensus, or if he doesn't take a moment to understand why you gave in to make things better, because you said you did it because you wanted to
compromise rather than give in. I think the aim is to
compromise, and so I think it really comes back to the fact that his belief system, his values, and it might reflect the company values. You don't know. I mean, we don't know enough about your organization to go deep into this, but it comes back to him not giving you, not allowing that compromise.
Yeah, it was very painful for me.
It's super painful, and it just goes to show that maybe it's not a good relationship with him more than the power struggle you were going through with the other leads. And so maybe you need to tackle that with him or his level of superiority and
And I also want to comment that we haven't really talked a lot about like organizational structures. Also, there's a lot of experimentation happening around like the operations side of like how your team is structured, and I think it's starting to become these guild type organization structures where you don't have design just like a silo department of only design, and those are the only people that are empathetic in the entire organization, right? It's really important to like split them up and have them be a part of the entire organization to help build that up, and I think that's really starting to change, and I know that like Spotify is starting to really do this, and a lot of other companies as well, and it's interesting to see kind of how that is coming back as far as data is concerned, and how the products are improving because of it.
Yeah, I know, Coleman, you've been earlier mentioning also that you have been part of many political companies that seem to be lacking.
I think everybody has. Yeah. Sounds like two of you guys have at some point. Is this the question we're going to now?
I think this is what we kind of like slowly went into discussing, segueing into the next.
One tip specifically for this situation, because I heard somebody a couple times the word compromise. Sometimes compromise can come across weak, because this is what I want, that's what you want, I'm going to give away what I want, right? And then other people say you don't have background. In any kind of relationship,
Something you can look at is the difference between compromise and negotiation. So really simply put, if with my partner, I'm just going to keep it super simple. I want Chinese food, he wants Turkish food. I don't feel like Turkish, he doesn't feel like Chinese. If we compromise, we will get pizza. And neither of us gets one. If we negotiate, we will say, okay, today we will do this thing, and tomorrow we'll do this thing for me. So we both get what we want. And so instead of saying, I'm going to add water to the wine, as you put it, maybe try and see, okay, so I can go with you on this one. This is what I would like in return. So then you have a little more of a balance, maybe. It's just something.
Yeah, my idea was to not. It was a long-term strategy because I knew if I would give her what she wants this time, it will harmonize the relationship for future collaboration.
Yeah, did you communicate this?
Yes, but now, well, I'm planning to lead the company as well.
No, but that's too bad, unfortunately. I think it sounds like exactly the lack of empathy to each other in your situation. It's too bad. I'm sure you can find a lot of people to talk about that maybe in more details. I want to make sure that we move on to another topics as well. But I think this is extremely important. Unfortunately, too bad to hear that because of the situation you're leaving the company. As a leader, I would, as a leader, for me that would be hurting. Like it sounds that something is wrong in your organization, like you Olga previously said. Unfortunately, yeah.
I think the question here, I think it's obvious. What a lack of empathy does in an organization is that I think
this example
it alienates people, right? It alienates your staff if it tolerates bad behavior, it alienates your staff. But on the bring it all the way back to UX, from the customer side, it alienates customers as well, because what happens is without empathy, or enough of it anyway, you build the wrong products, or you build products badly, and you use language that doesn't resonate with your audience. You have customer service teams that don't understand the customer, and therefore they're not equipped to help the customer. It's it's about alienation, and bringing it back to our personal thing with Christian. That's what he does. His lack of empathy in the playground, for example, means that he alienates other kids, right? Lovely little guy, but when he tries to join in, because he doesn't see it from their perspective, he spoils their games, or he's not, whatever it is, and they go like, oh, Christian's really annoying, and they move away from him. I always think that, actually not always, but it's made me think now that isn't that what UX designers bring to an organization? Is we help the organization be more empathetic, see things from a customer's perspective, and we all know the improvements that can make for everybody.
Yeah, I think that designers are in a really good place to shift not just the organization, but the product, and on a macro level, the industry, into being more empathetic. And I think what we've seen in this sort of growth of technology and product development is that a lot of the people who are the front runners don't operate from an empathy perspective. They want growth, they want at all costs. And what we can do as designers is we've really shifted our role from making things, from making things more usable, to really translating the value of decisions into business, right? The sort of monetary value. And so we're in the best position to influence not just the organization, but the product, and make it, as Coleman said, more useful, but also take our blinders away and make sure the products we're making are even useful as we look at the healthcare case.
Yeah, there is a comment over there.
I have a question, because I wonder whether the UX designers are really as empathetic as we think we are. Because no, because we can think about the customer and their needs and behaviors, but we really lack the capability to think from the business perspective, because somehow we always nag back, oh, the business doesn't understand what we want, but how is it possible that we cannot relate to the other departments of the company?
Well, that's why you should get into product.
Who's your neighbor? He has a great. Did you did a test? The empathy test?
Yeah, when I joined my company, when I joined my current company, every designer was supposed to take an empathy test, and sort of on a scale of 0 to 100, I scored 30. And it came with the label, or with sort of a warning, like you may want to look for therapy.
Wow.
You're a bad person. Go away. No, but I think in general, it's not necessarily like the designers have to have sort of the personal empathy that we talked about earlier, like the person-to-person empathy. And even as a designer, you can be totally unempathetic and still do a good job, but then you shift the need for empathy sort of to the researchers, or to the fact that the company needs a research department to find out what people really need, and then in a totally unempathetic way, you can design the best product for them. For the users.
There was a comment there at the back.
May I respond to that? You can
catch the thing.
He's so excited.
So I have a framework for this actually. The way I think about empathy is that empathy is a function of proximity and ability. So ability we can train, and that's the personal empathy that we think about, and also I feel like the comfort with which we can make empathic connections, but we can make up for, let's say, a lack of empathic ability by increasing proximity. And so you talk about research teams who will go out and actually find information about different people, or in the case that you mentioned, Marijs, about empathizing with the business perspective. If we learn about business and understand a bit more about where they are coming from, we increase our proximity to them, which helps us empathize with them better. So in that sense, it's not so bad if a person isn't empathic so much, as long as we understand how we can make up for it.
That happens with clients.
Yeah, adding to that.
Okay, no, never mind. Because, I don't know if any of you know complexity theory. It's the idea that if you have many different aspects thinking of a certain problem, then you can have more results. And that would result in like an economic sense. So there's a great example of a hotel, I think it was the Ritz-Carlton, and they were the best at giving good service to their customers. But then all of a sudden the industry changed, and the Hilton was getting amazing, and all these other hotels were getting better at it than they were. And so they said, okay, well, what has gone wrong? And they realized that they created silos within the company. So they said, well, we don't want that. We don't want a concierge to be the only person who can help a guest to be able to find restaurants. So what they decided to do was say, okay, the guest comes first. Everyone within the company has to make sure that that guest experience is the best. So everyone has autonomy to be able to fix that problem. So if you're a hotel guest and you're coming in late from a flight and you have 2 days in the city and you want to do something, the first interaction point might be with a maid who's just walking through the hallway. So you can talk to that maid and you can ask her, well, I want to have dinner reservations here, I want to do all these things. Previously, that maid had to go and ask the concierge, she had to go and ask the desk for certain things. But to give her that autonomy to be able to do that, and the training to be able to service that question from the customer, allowed her to have a lot more satisfaction, allowed the guest to know that she was being taken care of. And so the company had to invest in training to make sure that anyone could do something to fix this problem, but also that they could go to any other team or any other part of the company to be able to ask for that, and they had to help her. So they changed from the top to the bottom the way that people were actually helping the customers. And what they found was this had a lot of success in making people really love the way that they were, helping people and treating people, but also it allowed those employees to realize that they liked other jobs better. So they had to do cross-training, so that maid got to cross-train as a concierge. And they saw a lot more movement in the types of jobs people were doing, and they had a lot of retention in the operation. And so the whole company had to change in order to really create this value. And it helped the customers, but more so, it helped the employees to feel like they were heard, that they had autonomy, they weren't looked down upon by sort of higher roles, and they also got to find what they loved most and stay in that company. So I think that's a good example of how a whole system can shift to help these things. And that's maybe a more functional element rather than maybe looking for persons.
Super cool. Can I talk about the question? Because I think it's a brilliant one, because we have this advisory council that helps us figure out what education we should be focusing on. And the number one thing that comes up all the time is that you've got to have some sort of module about business, right? It's like every UX designer should be educated about like how does a business work, and like what are the basics of of running an organization? What are the objectives of an organization? Because I definitely look back at my career, I think earlier on, just the purist. It was about the design and the customer. Forget about everything else. You just want to make this perfect, right? But that is almost worse than useless when you consider that the design has to be serving two sides of the thing simultaneously. Not just about the customer, it has to be about the business as well. And I think if you think about conditioning and having to unlearn stuff, I think designers probably have been too conditioned to think about the user only, and the business isn't the enemy. You know,
I think we're also just starting, to get a seat at the table with the business side of things, right? So now we're able to have those conversations and to be able to make an impact on the business. And I think that it's super important for the success of the product and the organization as a whole. So, yeah.
So I'm having a hard job today. I have to be empathetic for all of you because I know that you're sitting for too long. So I would like to move to the last point, and I would like to all of these discussions to move to the table with a beautiful food, because I think that's the last closing question that we have prepared is another flip of the medal, and I would like to talk to our panelists for like a few minutes more so we can let you go, about are there any possible downsides of empathy? And I know, Anna, we've discussed that with you, so maybe you could share some of your experiences.
The most important thing is what Coleman just said, is if you're too empathic to your end users, you may forget the empathy for the business goals. So this is the biggest failure. So you need tools to have more confidence with these business goals and how to come up with as well the business needs as the user needs in one interface design. So you have to combine it. So if you're too empathic to your end users, you may be not empathic enough to the business analysts or product owners. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Your first, your main stakeholder is your team, not your end user.
That's a good way to look into that.
I also have a point to that because that actually relates to you. To the question I had.
Where's the microphone?
Yeah, I was just about to ask to reframe that one. Because it's are we stopping?
No, the microphone. Just one. If you're talking, please talk into the microphone. Sorry.
Yeah, so one of the very big downsides, if you understand where somebody's coming from, then you might be okay or condone their behavior or actually. But you said you had some habits and they were not good for you, but everybody understood why you had them, so they just let you do your thing, and it actually helps people stay in their destructive pattern because you understand.
Exactly, the destructive pattern.
Because who doesn't have that friend who's complaining a lot and they're trying to change something, but they don't change anything, and so you're just listening to them complain. Like, who has that? So then you're being empathic to your friend because you're listening to them and you're being a good friend, but you're actually enabling them to keep doing the things that are not good for them. So the downside is that it actually you don't take action to help somebody and confront them with their behavior, and we really need to. That's being a real friend. So somebody shut up, do something.
I also wanted to point an example of that in what happened in Booking.com. So we all know that Booking.com was the best at checkout solution and not dropping people on the way on their last. Exactly. So they basically designed their technology to get to the point that the product would not enable you in any way to fall off the track of actually booking your trip, right? So they were very much technology based until about 4 years ago. And about 4 years ago, they started hiring more and more people into the customer service department, right? So they became a little bit more empathetic towards the needs of the customer beyond the booking, because obviously you would book through an online tool, and then the experience that you have in the hotel would be completely different and would not be the experience of Booking.com that can manage that outcome. And obviously Booking.com would get all the bad comments, all the negative things, and it would be like a thread of just shitstorm over there. So how do you manage with that, right? So they started hiring more and more people that are now doing basically the customer service that used to be done by the hotels themselves is now outsourced through Booking.com. So whoever wants to, like, the business that Booking.com is in right now, it's called customer service. It has nothing to do with hotels, it has nothing to do with hospitality, it has to do with customer service. So the more you enable them to use this tool or this channel to complain about things and to get refunds and to get things, the more they're gonna do that. And now the customers, like the hotels, the business partners, are complaining to Booking.com, like, look, guys, you've been enabling us to deliver a great amount of customer support that we were not able to, which is great. However, we're getting also a lot of drop downs and refunds because of your platform. So how the hell do we manage this? Because it's becoming a chaos. Just like Airbnb enabling people to get refunds for different things, to to enable the house owners to feel at peace of mind that if a guest will destroy something, you would have a cover. So all these. I call them thresholds, right? All these thresholds that enable the behavior to continue into a destructive pattern should somehow be managed as well. So this is in my opinion the downside. So how do we manage that threshold at a societal level and at a design level so that we all as designers are okay with understanding that there's an ethics to designing things that enable people, and have a margin, a limit of what extent do we really give that threshold to happen?
I think that maybe is a longer conversation.
Yeah. I would like these kind of conversations to move to the other room. And
I think it comes back to what Anne said about making sure that the business value isn't considered or the societal value isn't forgotten, right? So it's our job as designers to get to our clients to make sure that we're looking at those things.
I'm curious, what are some of the final words or like some final advice that each and every one of you can give to the crowd and to ourselves in regards to how to grow and be more empathetic or using the right type of that?
I would say continually learn, read more, talk more to your colleagues, ask them where their perspectives are. I think it's, sometimes people think, oh, well, we're leaders, we know, lots of things. Mm-hmm. But really it's like a lifelong journey, right? Continue to learn, continue to ask for feedback, and you'll just continue to grow, yeah.
I think it's about being, since we had this conversation, we're preparing for this thing, I kind of like, am I really empathetic? Am I any good at it?
Maybe we should all take that test.
Yeah, what's it like to work for me? God only knows. But I think that kind of self-examination, it's a tricky word, mindfulness, just be mindful of, how am I doing with this, and it was a great point a few guys made. Before we jump in and criticize other people's lack of empathy, maybe like, well, hang on a second, how am I doing here on this? Am I the problem? Rarely, but.
And the non-violence communication is a very beautiful technique for this.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. We're reflecting on our blinders when we end up not having diversity in our teams, because I think sometimes we're a little afraid as leaders to have tension and to have negative or more difficult personalities. I think sometimes we really have to make sure that we're not just building teams and companies that reflect our own voice and our own ideas. And so it's partially that self-reflection, but also really making sure that you're hiring for diversity, and that's diversity of perspectives as well as it is diversity in a more inclusive way.
Yeah.
Small comment. First, get a pet.
And have a child.
Yeah.
Get a which, sorry?
Get a pet.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the second one, again, I'm not a very empathic person, like by nature. So I kind of educated myself to. Now it became automatic, but at first I educated myself, kind of ask, what do you think? And what's your take on it? And I think when we show an interest in the other person's opinion and speak only from our perspective, it kind of resonates, and modeling for others around us to be more sensitive and empathic to the others. And I feel it for the past year that in my surrounding at work, it really works. I mean, I also work with multinational teams with very different culture, like from Spain to England to Germany. And in some way, we kind of succeeded to form a good relationship and empathic and yeah. So that's catch.
I found it. I stumbled upon it by accident in my organization. So I don't know if you know this book, The Culture Map. Yeah. So I once made a presentation and actually used that as a basis, but I did more research to it. I come from background of social science as well, and then I did just for my team to be able to help them with their actual work for international clients. And then it somehow took off in the organization, and I'm getting emails to request access to it 2 years on from like overseas offices, from like business department everywhere. And what I learned from it is that it's a very good thing to open up this intercultural conversation, because it teaches people on a personal level also how they relate to each other. And it's something I found by accident, and I can recommend to like start talking about cultural differences. It's non-threatening to your team. Frame it if you want, like it will help your work with the client and the business, but it will actually have a big effect in the team. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I would like to thank everyone for activity today. I think there was an amazing amount of comment and questions. You guys and girls are amazing. But there is this question, and I would like to, we have some prizes to give away, of course. And I would like to go for help to the panelists. Maybe we can pick 5 people which we will give away the teamies to while I'm fixing the slides. Yeah, best question. Who has the best favorite question or a comment today?
I do. I'll go first.
You go first, Coleman.
Я пока возьму слайды.
I think Marijs has a very beautiful question because she asked, "Hey, how empty are we?" Yes. Did I respond to? Yeah.
Of course, I agree with you now.
So you get a lot of prizes. Yeah. Yes. Go.
I don't know the lady's name, but the comment about the discussion about your child, Montessori, from Israel, book about nonviolent communication.
3 prizes.
I really enjoyed that. I have all questions, but yeah.
I appreciate Peter for talking about the scenario where he thought he was empathetic and then he didn't. I realizing to remind us all that we need to really check ourselves first, and it goes back to the point there as well. But yeah, is it our problem first, and do we really know if we're so empathetic?
I like the point. I think it's very relatable. What do you do if somebody's not receptive to your feedback and they show resistance? We didn't go too much into detail, but I think it's super fascinating topic.
I think that's one. I think Jamie.
Yeah, I liked your question about the cultural, communication and how you can relate to that person a bit more. Yeah.
And the slides first.
So everyone who got the best question or the best note, please reach out to me afterwards. We'll get your emails and we'll send you the links to team.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.